Mark your calendars because open enrollment is just around the corner. From November 1st to December 15th, 2024, you'll have the opportunity to review your health insurance options, compare plans, and make important decisions about your coverage for the upcoming year. This is a critical time for individuals, especially those in the LGBTQ plus community, who are feeling the strain of healthcare expenditures and high costs. According to the National Library of Medicine, same-sex marriage couples spend anywhere between $200 and $2,900 more on healthcare each year than their heterosexual counterparts. Now here to weigh in, we've got Katie Carlson, Bank of America Private Bank Head of Wealth Strategy. Great to have you here with us. So this is a big time for everyone to consider the new costs that might be taken on for healthcare plans going into next year, but especially, as we mentioned, for LGBTQ plus families. What are some of the biggest changes and some of the things that they should be looking out for as they are looking to navigate these costs and select plans?
Thank you so much, Brad. It's great to be here. And we do know that there are unique challenges for the LGBTQ plus community, especially when we start to think about healthcare and, quite frankly, family planning. You know that family planning is a really personal choice for anyone, but as the LGBTQ plus community thinks about creating those families, they have to do them in what we consider non-traditional ways, which can often be at added cost when you start to have to think about potentially having sperm donors or surrogates, looking at adoption. All of those are different things that come at a cost. And so what you want to do when making healthcare choices is understand what plans offer in terms of fertility specialists and surrogacy.
You know, this is an interesting stat that was compiled by our producers, and I believe, is also a part of what you've been tracking as well in your work. 1 in 10 LGBTQ plus adults married to a same-sex partner, unmarried, though LGBTQ plus couples may require special arrangements for estate planning. As they think about, and that is a household discussion about estate planning, what most notably should they be taking into consideration for that part of the financial planning as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a really important stat. You just said it. 10% of our LGBTQ plus community actually are married, and they're afforded the protections of married individuals when you think about transferring assets. That means 90% aren't, but it doesn't mean that they're not in committed relationships. So as you start to think about, what is the purpose of an estate plan? The purpose of an estate plan is around control. To whom and to how you want to give your assets. And then you want to start to think about taxes. For individuals that choose to stay in relationships but don't choose to get married, we want to start to think about, how do you want those assets to pass? There's a few different ways to do that. There are mechanisms through the estate plan, through wills, and through trusts that very specifically name beneficiaries. But you also want to look at company-sponsored plans that you may have, looking at who is listed as the beneficiary, making sure that you're naming that partner or that person that you're most interested in caring for. And then step 2 of that is really what I like to think about of the who is going to take care of me long term. When we think about an estate plan, there are fundamental building blocks. You think about a will, you think about a trust. We also want to think about powers of appointment, and really importantly are those healthcare proxies. For the LGBT community, this becomes increasingly more important, making sure that if you aren't married, you have someone named to take care of you if you end up in a hospital or are unable to make those decisions for yourselves. That's where that healthcare proxy becomes critically important.
Katie, the cost of planning for a family is another financial strain for the LGBTQ plus community continuing to face this. And I want to get your reaction to a clip from one of Yahoo Finance's podcasts, Living Not So Fabulously. Take a listen, we'll get your reaction.
We were lucky to have some friends that had gone through it. We were pretty focused on the surrogacy process and wanting to do surrogacy from day one. So we had a couple of very good friends that walked us through the steps, all the different stakeholders you need to engage to it. Right. And luckily actually set us up with their egg donor agent. That was really our first, I think, connection.
It's a big financial burden to do all at once, but doing that one at a time was definitely the way to go for us.
And it's not just the financial burden, but the range of the financial burden, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's quite it's quite a delta that, the budget that one gives, is right in, if you kind of aim for right in the middle, but you can have an oops side to that where it can go considerably higher. So you have to be prepared for that when you start surrogacy.
And so, Katie, how expensive can family planning get, and how can you prepare for a hefty cost like that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it can run from tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on both how much in the way of fertility do you need. And in the segment we just saw, they were looking for an egg donor and a surrogate. Sometimes you might just be looking for a sperm donor. But also what you have to consider is most people are not successful the first try, or maybe not even the second try. And so you really need to understand both what potentially can your insurance cover, and then you need to start to look into the cost. This is where that financial planning becomes critically important. And I think for anyone that is approaching this process, you need to expect to do it more than once. And that's where I think there's a lot of pitfalls, is that lots of individuals think I'll be successful that first time.
Katie Carlson, who is the Bank of America Private Bank Head of Wealth Strategy. Katie, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Certainly. For more on real money stories with activists, allies, artists, tech gurus, and trailblazers in the LGBTQ plus community, make sure to listen in to Yahoo Finance's podcast, Living Not So Fabulously, hosted by David and John Ottenschneider. New episodes are out every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern on all streaming platforms.